I realize this is somewhat of an odd angle to shoot one of these, but I had to figure out a way to get the camera mounted here on the soundboard. And every time I was trying to set it up, it was falling over. So it's being backed up right now by a notebook. Technology is a wonderful thing. Just wanted to share a couple of thoughts. Came into work today on an off day, and I've been on vacation, but I'm coming back Monday, and I would like to come in Monday. And if I have any surprises, which I will, I should probably come in today, get a few things done and out of the way, so I'll have time to deal with all of the surprises. Seems to me that works out pretty well. I was handling some things. I had to change out some music for Monday because we are no longer going to be playing Christmas bumper music so many days after Christmas, so I had to replace all of that, and I decided to go with new music instead of the stuff I've been using for 4 years. Today is my 4th anniversary as an Idahoan, and I arrived in this town 4 years ago this afternoon, and then I was in the studio on December 30th, 2014 for my very first day on air. So we're very close to my solo anniversary too, which was just after New Year's. I did my first show alone here. A friend of mine said, "You're talking too fast, slow down." Still, sometimes, depending on the volume of coffee that I'm drinking, I do have that issue come up. A couple of just quick notes. I just wanted to mention some things because I did a video yesterday on another format, and I was talking in that other video about 2 weeks ago, well, less than 2 weeks ago, a week and a half, we'll say, when Donald Trump ended up getting into a row with his defense secretary, who is now leaving this weekend, as you know, over the situation in Syria. The president, by the way, keeping a promise. He's not going to have the United States playing policeman all over the world. I did a video yesterday, and I'm not blaming James Mattis for his reaction. Mattis, by all intents, is a very honorable man. But I did point out, I said, people like Mattis are a lot like other people who work in government. Mattis has essentially been living in government housing for 4 decades, and they may not necessarily have quite noticed the changes that have taken place culturally in flyover country, where you've got, well, they see the reports coming in, and it says that a lot of the recruits aren't in very good shape and that we have a diminishing pool of people who can actually serve in the military. There should be a little alarm bell going off, and that says life is tough in various parts of the country, essentially from the coal country in northeast Pennsylvania all the way west to about Lake Tahoe, with just a few islands of prosperity in between. This country needs to concentrate on healing itself instead of necessarily playing policeman to the world. Now, you could get into a shooting war unexpectedly. Churchill once remarked to Chamberlain. Chamberlain was still serving as PM, and Churchill had been brought into the cabinet, and Chamberlain said, "But we're not ready for war, Winston." And Churchill said, "Funny thing about war, it doesn't wait until you're ready." But we can stay out of a lot of conflicts. Now, somebody coming and attacking us, worthwhile to go to war. Somebody launching a few incendiaries in Syria, not necessarily our business. I think we've got to start looking at it that way, and I think the American people are growing weary of all of this. So I discussed this a little bit, as you know, if you saw my other format. I discussed this a bit yesterday. But when the president made that change where he said, I accept the resignation, and then later decided he was going to push Mattis out even a little earlier, you had liberals in media who were calling for the ouster of President Trump through a military coup. Think about that for a moment. These same people who claim they value the First Amendment would turn around and demand that the whole House of Cards be kicked over because they don't like Donald Trump, and suggesting a coup. It's a little bit like the people who are angry about Trump pulling out on the right, who say, well, we shouldn't cut and run, and we've made commitments. No. If you're a constitutionalist, Donald Trump or any president needs to go to Congress and say, hey, will you authorize these troops being there for this extended period of time? That hasn't happened. Presidents over the last several decades have pretty much sent troops wherever they darned well pleased, and there isn't a lot of what you'd call advice and consent going on from over on Capitol Hill, which there should be. The president is not an emperor. The president is actually designed as a constitutionally weak office. So you can't have it both ways, on the right or the left. But these lefties who are advising some sort of political coup, they've been smoking way too much dope, and I'll tell you why. They bring this up as if they think that somehow the military is going to go out there in the ranks and they're going to say Donald Trump must go. Well, the officer corps might be unhappy about this situation because it's the officers corps, it's the job of these men to fight wars, even if they're brush wars all over the world. If you do well, that's how you advance in the Pentagon. Makes complete sense, doesn't it? It's a little bit like talk radio in the sense that, I'm making an analogy here, I'm not saying it's combat. But in talk radio, controversy sells. It helps us. The more controversy we have that we can talk about, whether it be political or cultural, if that brings listeners into the tent, that means we prosper. So I understand that people would like to continue to prosper. However, the notion that the ranks would like to be, some of these guys are in double-digit deployments by now in this century. You would think that perhaps they might want to come home and tend to their families and their careers. Now, they knew what they signed up for, that's true. But this notion that we're going to be in perpetual war, we're $22 trillion in debt officially. Officially is a nice way to say it could be a lot larger. What in blazes are these people thinking? So the media has this belief, and I guess because they've been trying to cheerlead the social engineering, you've got all of these gender benders in the military at the moment, and I guess the media thought that they would come out and they would attack Donald Trump and actually might roll tanks down Pennsylvania Avenue, point the guns at the White House, and tell him to skedaddle, or worse. So Trump goes off and he visits the troops overseas, and then the media has a meltdown because not only did some of these people bring MAGA hats, but some of these people in uniform showed up with Trump flags. How dare they? They should be court-martialed. But it shows you, and I was mentioning this the other day, I've seen the surveys. There's polling that is continually done. You can read about it in Military Times or some of the other publications, Army Times or Air Force Times. You can read about this. Polling data shows Donald Trump is exceptionally popular with the fighting men and women. Barack Hussein Obama wasn't. In fact, Obama did a speech, I believe it was at Fort Bragg some years ago, where Obama was appearing at Fort Bragg, and when he finished the speech, there was just a smattering of applause, and an anchor at CNN said, wow. And after that, they had to put up an applause light. Applaud here when Obama speaks, because he was so roundly unpopular with the troops. So the media now, which a week and a half ago was suggesting there should be a coup and that we should bring the republic to an end and have a serious crisis because of a coup, the media is now angry because they've just realized that the military, at least the people who count, who do all of the fighting, they would back Donald Trump. And that has to be a serious setback for the left in this country because they delude themselves when they think everybody else out there is a pipe-smoking liberal. Not the case. Not at all the case. And I'm reminded of something I saw, a meme. We have a gun show that airs on this radio station once a week. One of the gun guys put a meme up on Facebook. He sent me a copy of it. And it asks a question. Well, basically, I'll give you the details of it if I don't ask it in a question form. It says, one side has 18 trillion rounds of ammunition. The other side doesn't know what bathroom to use. And those are the people who are calling for a coup. Some years ago, when I was involved in the Tea Party movement, I was working at a radio station in Delaware. I became really the public face of the Tea Party in that particular state. And the four founders of the Tea Party chapter in that state would also back that up because they ended up becoming very, very good friends and still are at this point. But I can remember we were having a big, big rally. We brought out like 1,500 people in a state with fewer than 1 million residents. We brought out 1,500 people on a summer afternoon for a rally on the green outside the state capitol. Now, people have lots of things they can do, especially in a state with beaches when it's, late July, early August. 1,500 of them showed up. We know because we had a big giant scroll and we asked everybody to sign. We ended up with 1,500 names. Now, some people didn't want to sign. They thought that might be too dangerous. But I can remember that we were leading up to this rally, some of the liberal bloggers in the state who were trying to claim that, anybody in the Tea Party was clearly racist and They were going to. We were out to bring about the end of Barack Obama, and we would do it violently. And of course, there's never any violence at a Tea Party rally whatsoever, unless it was caused by somebody attacking someone within the Tea Party. So one of these bloggers, I can remember this idiot said something along the lines of, we need some Union hard hats to go down there and crack a few skulls. But I was the MC. I was standing up on stage and I said, hey, how many Republicans are here? A number of them raised their hands, overwhelming majority. How many independents are here? And there were a large number of hands. And then I said, how many Democrats here? Well, guess what? There were a lot of Democrats there. There's this notion among the elite, the effete liberals in this country, that the old unionized workers who wore hard hats, and by the way, most union workers now are people who work for the government. They're wearing white shirts and ties, and they're sitting at a desk all day, probably sleeping. But those are the main body of unionized workers. The old industrial unions were gone for the most part long ago. Numbers are way, way down. But the people who were in those industrial unions, remember, they put Donald Trump over the top on election night in 2016. These are people who are hardworking folks. Many of them have military backgrounds. If you didn't know it, my dad was very much involved in the UAW and then later the IBEW, that is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. He traveled extensively on union business when I was a boy and very much was in tune with union issues. My dad was also a veteran of 3rd Armored Division. And most of his buddies, by the way, were people who'd been serving in wartime or Cold Warriors. They were all in uniform. They were flag-waving patriots. They didn't believe that somebody who wasn't sure if he was a boy or a girl should be able to pick what bathroom they would use. And if they'd encountered somebody like that, woe be to the confused is all I can say. And so the notion that the left has is that somehow they travel apparently in such a small circle with their fellow brie-eating Cabernet sippers that they just simply don't have the ability to fathom that a great many Americans don't agree with them. And when it comes to the military is not comprised of a bunch of guys from wealthy suburbs of Boston or from Manhattan or from the Hamptons on Long Island. The military is comprised of a bunch of guys who can pick off a chipmunk at 1,400 yards. These are guys from Kentucky, from West Virginia, from Alabama, from Idaho, from the middle of the country. And yet, somehow, Lefty keeps deluding himself and claiming that this is only going to be a matter of days and they're going to take over the country and their revolution is going to be complete. And of course, they show their true colors when they call for a military coup. They definitely do. All right, got to run. Hope you all have a great day. Have a great holiday weekend. It's partially a holiday weekend. I'm not working New Year's Day. There's a lot of college football to watch, obviously. But we will be here Monday on air. That will be the 31st between 6 and 10 a.m. Mountain Time on Magic Valley this morning. All right. Now I've got to have this shut this thing down, which is always a little bit on the sloppy side. Got to get better at this video editing thing.